She told my son I was stealing her money. So I left $10,000 on the table and waited. My name is Celestine. I am 67 years old. I have two hands that have worked every single day of my life since I was 14 years old. These hands have pressed other people's shirts, packed other people's groceries, mopped other people's floors, and folded other people's laundry. These hands have braided my granddaughter's hair and kneaded dough at 4 in the morning, and held my son's face when he cried over his first heartbreak at 16. These hands have signed checks and stirred pots and planted tomatoes and turned the pages of the Bible my mother left me when she passed. These are honest hands. They have never, not one single time in 67 years, taken a thing that did not belong to them. So you can imagine what happens inside me when my son, Grayson, calls me on a Tuesday morning, voice low and careful like he is walking on ice, and tells me that his wife, Brielle, says I have been stealing money from her purse. I go still, the kind of still that happens before something breaks. I say, "Excuse me, baby? Say that one more time." And he does. Slower, quieter, like saying it slower makes it easier for me to swallow. He says Brielle keeps track of her cash. He says she noticed money going missing on the days I visit. $50 here, $100 there. He says she wrote it all down in a little notebook. He says it has been happening for months. Months. I am standing in my kitchen. My coffee is on the counter getting cold. Outside my window, the garden I planted last spring is coming in green and full. I look at it for a long time while my son talks. I look at the tomatoes, climbing, the wire fence and the marigolds, along the border and the rosemary bush that has been there for 11 years now. I planted all of it. I built all of it. With these hands. I say, "Grayson, you know me." He gets very quiet. And that quiet, that silence that stretches between us on the phone like something pulled too tight, tells me more than any words could. Because in that silence, I can hear the question he is not asking out loud. I can hear him not being completely, fully, 100% certain. After 39 years of being his mother, after everything I have ever given and sacrificed and done, he is sitting somewhere in that house with his wife's words and my words, and he does not know which way to fall. That silence cracks something in me. Deep down, in a place I do not let people see. I say, "Okay, baby, I hear you," and I hang up the phone. Then I sit down at my kitchen table, I drink my cold coffee, and I think, let me tell you about Brielle, because you need to understand who she is before you understand what I did. Brielle came into Grayson's life 4 years ago. He met her at a work event, one of those company parties where everyone is dressed a little too nicely and smiling, a little too wide. He brought her to Sunday dinner about 2 months in, and I remember the way she walked through my front door, looking at everything with those sharp, assessing eyes, taking inventory. She was lovely to look at. Smooth skin, natural hair pinned up, a pretty yellow dress. She hugged me and said my home smelled wonderful, and she complimented my cooking twice. All of it was exactly right. Too exactly right. Like someone who had rehearsed. Her smile never reached her eyes. Not once. Not at that dinner, not at Christmas, not at the grandchildren's birthday parties. The mouth would curve and the cheeks would lift, but those eyes stayed flat and calculating. I noticed it immediately. I am 67 years old. I have been watching people my whole life. I know a performed smile from a real one. But I kept that observation to myself because Grayson was happy, and a mother who loves her child puts the child's happiness first and keeps her observations to herself until there is a real reason to speak. The changes came gradually. That is how these things always work. Gradually, so that by the time you notice how different everything looks, you have already forgotten what it looked like before. Grayson's friend Marcus, who grew up in our neighborhood, who spent half his childhood eating at my table, started disappearing from Grayson's life. When I asked about him, Grayson shrugged and said they had drifted. His cousin Fletcher, who he used to fish with every summer, same thing. Just drift, drift, drift. One by one, the people who knew Grayson before Brielle slowly faded away. And me? I started getting shorter invitations. Dinners that used to last all evening started ending at 8. Visits that used to be every Sunday became every other Sunday. Then, once a month, when I called Grayson, sometimes Brielle was there in the background and the conversation would shift. He would get shorter, more careful, like she was listening and he was performing for her. My grandchildren, Grayson's two little ones from his first marriage. Little Deja, who is 7, and sweet baby Colt, who just turned 5. They always ran to me when I came. Always. The moment I walked through the door, they would come flying at me and wrap themselves around my legs and drag me to whatever they were playing. But lately, I had noticed Brielle watching those moments with a look on her face I could not quite name. Not quite jealousy. Something more controlled than jealousy. Something more deliberate. I kept showing up anyway, with love and food and open arms. Because that is what mothers do. You keep showing up. You do not let anyone make you abandon your child, even when your child is a grown man. And now she was telling him I was a thief. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I thought about my mother, who passed 11 years ago and who I miss every single day. My mother was a woman of deep and quiet wisdom. She did not shout her wisdom from rooftops. She dropped it like seeds. Small things said in passing that you did not fully understand until years later, when the seed had grown into something you could stand under. One of the things she always said to me was this. She said, Celestine, when somebody shows you who they are, do not waste your breath arguing with them. Give them enough rope. Then wait. I had been given a very clear showing of who Brielle was. It was time to give her some rope. I got up from that table. I went to my bedroom. On the top shelf of my closet, behind my winter sweaters and my mother's old hat box, I have a lockbox. I opened it. Inside, I had been keeping savings for years. Emergency money. The kind of money a woman who raised a child, alone and worked double shifts and never knew when the next hard season was coming, always keeps somewhere safe and quiet. I counted out $10,000. $100 bills, $50 bills, a few 20s. I put it in a plain white envelope and I sealed it and I put it in my handbag. Then I called Grayson on Saturday morning and I said, Baby, can I come by today? I want to see Deja and Colt. He said yes. He sounded relieved that I called, like he had been holding his breath all week. I baked a peach cobbler Friday night. Those grandbabies love my peach cobbler more than almost anything in this world. I wrapped it carefully in foil and I drove over that afternoon. Cobbler in one hand, handbag on my shoulder, envelope tucked inside. Brielle opened the front door. She gave me the smile, all mouth, flat eyes. Celestine, so good to see you. Come on in. Perfect, warm, practiced. I smiled back. I went inside. I hugged Deja so tight she squealed with joy and little. Colt climbed up me like a tree and I laughed the way I only laugh with those babies, from somewhere completely real and unguarded. I put the cobbler on the kitchen counter. I sat on the living room floor and played a board game with Deja while Colt drove his toy trucks over my legs and narrated everything happening in his little truck world with total seriousness. Grayson was in and out, going back and forth between the living room and the back porch where he had some kind of project going. Brielle moved around the kitchen. I could feel her awareness of me, the way you feel weather changing before the sky does anything. That pressure. After about 30 minutes, I excused myself from the board game, told Deja I would be right back, and I walked calmly to the dining room. I reached into my handbag. I took out the white envelope. I set it directly in the center of the dining room table, right in the middle where nobody walking through that room could possibly miss it. And then I walked back and sat back, down on that floor and went right back to the board game. About 12 minutes passed. Then I heard Brielle come out of the kitchen and walk toward the dining room. I heard her footsteps stop. I kept my eyes on Deja's move. I heard the quiet sound of the envelope being picked up. Silence. The sound of paper being opened just slightly. More silence. A long silence. Then her footsteps coming toward the living room. She stood in the doorway holding the envelope, and she said, "Celestine, what is this on the table?" I looked up slowly. I said, easy and calm, "Oh, that is $10,000, honey." She stared at me, blinked, said, "Why did you put $10,000 on my dining room table?" I said, "Well, since I have apparently been stealing from this house for months, I figured I ought to go ahead and pay it all back." With interest. The room went completely silent. Deja looked at me. Colt stopped moving his truck. And then from behind Brielle came Grayson's voice. He was standing in the hallway. He had come in from the back porch without either of us hearing him, and he was standing very still in the doorway, and his face was doing something complicated. He said, "What did you say, Mama?" I looked at him steadily. I said it again without a single tremor. "I left $10,000 on the dining room table. Since Brielle has been telling you I steal from this house, I want to make sure everything is paid back in full." Grayson looked at Brielle. The look on his face in that moment was not one I had ever seen on him before. It was the look of a man who is standing at the edge of something and suddenly realizes he has been walking toward it for a long time without knowing it. Brielle said quickly, "That is not what I meant. I never said definitely it was her. I just said money was going missing and I was trying to figure it out. I said, you told my son I was taking 50 here and 100 there and that you had been keeping written records of it. That is an accusation, Brielle. That is a clear and specific accusation." She said, "I was just worried. I was not trying to." I said, "I know what you were trying to do." The room went quiet again. A different kind of quiet this time. I stood up from the floor slowly. The way a person stands when they are in no hurry because they have already won. I reached into my handbag and I took out my phone. I opened my banking application. I walked over to Grayson and I held the screen out to him and I said, "Look, baby." He looked. I watched his eyes move over the numbers. The balance. The transaction history going back years. Steady, consistent deposits. No withdrawals that could not be explained by utilities or groceries or a grandchild's birthday gift. The balance, even after taking out $10,000 this week, was larger than most people would expect from a woman who spent her career pressing laundry and bagging groceries. Because I had worked every available hour and spent carefully and never wasted and never taken shortcuts. Every dollar in that account had been earned and earned honestly. I said quietly, "A woman who steals does not have savings that look like that. A woman who steals does not bring $10,000 cash to somebody's house to prove she never needed to take their 50." Grayson sat down on the couch. He sat down like the floor had tilted. He put his face in his hands. Brielle said, "Grayson, I really did not mean it the way it came out. I was honestly just confused about where the cash was going, and I thought," he said, without lifting his face, "Brielle, stop talking right now." She stopped. I looked at her. I said, "I am going to say this once, clearly and without anger, because I am not an angry woman and I did not come here today to fight. I have never taken a single thing from this house. Not $1. Not ever. I come here because I love my son and I love those babies. And because family means something to me. I have shown up to this house with food and time and love at every opportunity. And I will not be accused under this roof. Not now, not ever. Not by anyone." I paused. I let that land. Then I said, "I also want you to know, Brielle, that I am not blind. I have not been blind for a single day of the past 4 years. I have watched and I have kept quiet because I respect my son's marriage and his choices. But I see the work you have been doing, the quiet, careful work, the friends who disappeared, the invitations that got shorter, the way my son sounds different on the phone when you are in the room. I see it. I have always seen it. And I am not the only one who will see it eventually." Nobody said anything. I went to the kitchen and I plated 2 bowls of cobbler for Deja and Colt, and I called, Them in, and I watched. Them eat, and I listened to every word they said, and I loved them, fully and without reservation, because none of this was about them, and they deserved every drop of that love. Then I went to Grayson. I held him the way I have held him since he was ours, old completely. Without condition, I whispered in his ear, I forgive you for the doubt, baby. You are human and I love you. But you need to look honestly at what is happening in this house. Not for me. For you and for those babies. He held on to my arm when I started to pull back. His eyes were full. He said, Mama, I am sorry. I said, I know. I touched his face once with my palm the way I have done since he was small. I know. I nodded at real. Not warm, not cold. Just real. And I walked out. That was 13 days ago. Grayson calls every day now. On the 4th day after that Saturday, late at night, he told me what Brielle found when she went back through everything carefully. The missing money. All of it. An online purchase she had placed and then forgotten completely. 2 cash lunches she had never recorded. A donation she had made at a school. Fundraiser and mentally. Filed away as something else. Every cent accounted for. Nothing stolen. Nothing missing. Her own records had gaps she had simply not noticed. He wept when he told me. Real weeping. The kind that comes up from somewhere deep and guilty and ashamed. He kept saying he was sorry. He said he should have never entertained it for 1 second. Should have shut it down immediately. Should have known better. Should have trusted what he knew about me with his whole life. I let him cry. Then I said, Grayson, listen to me. I forgive you. Fully and completely. I am not holding this against you. You are my son and I love you, and that does not change. He exhaled like he had been underwater. I said, but I need you to be honest with yourself about what has been happening in your home. Not because I want anything from you, because you deserve a life built on honesty. Those babies deserve to grow up in a home built on honesty. And you are a good man who has been slowly, quietly taught not to see certain things clearly. That ends now, baby. You look clearly now. He said, I know, Mama. I see it. I do not know exactly what is happening between them. I know they are having hard conversations. I know Grayson is paying attention in ways he was not before. I know that whatever comes next is between them, and God and I have no need to insert myself into it. My job was never to break up my son's marriage. My job was to make sure my son could see me clearly, that he knew who I was and what I was made of. That is all I ever needed. And $10,000 in a plain white envelope on a dining room table did that job better than any argument I could have made with words. My mother used to say, baby, the truth does not need a loud voice. It just needs enough space to breathe. I gave it $10,000 worth of space, and I waited. And the truth did exactly what the truth always does when you give it room. It breathed. It grew. It filled every corner of that room until there was nowhere left for anything else to stand. I am Celestine. I am 67 years old. My hands are clean and my name is clean, and my savings are back in my lockbox, and my rosemary bush is blooming outside my kitchen window, and my peach cobbler is still the best thing those grandbabies have ever tasted. Nobody has ever taken my dignity or my good name. Not one soul on this earth. And they never will. Because I do not argue with people about who I am. I simply show them. I show up, I set the truth in the center of the room, and I wait for the light to find it. It always does. If you love your grandma the way I loved mine, then you already know that a woman like that never needed to steal a single thing in her entire life. She built everything she ever had with nothing but hard work and faith, and to completely honest hands. Drop your city in the comments right now and tell me where you are watching from. And if this story touched something in your heart today, please hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss another story like this one, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone out there needs to be reminded today that the truth always finds its way to the surface.